Welcome to the Tailwind Marketing Podcast, where we talk to IT marketing leaders about how to drive more sales. Hosted by Carlos Corredor, founder of Condor, an Inc. 5000 company and one of the fastest growing IT marketing agencies in the US.
3, 2, 1, 0.
This episode is brought to you by Condor Digital Marketing Agency. Do you feel that your marketing team is stretched thin, running campaigns, building landing pages, reporting on leads that no one follows up on, and it's still not enough? Condor helps you turn all the marketing efforts that no one sees into pipeline that no one can ignore. They are built to work with marketing departments from B2B, mid-market tech services companies across their main functions, demand generation, website, and marketing operations. You can learn more at condoragency.com. In today's episode, we have with us Larry Kaiser. He has more than 20 years of experience with a heavy focus on healthcare IT in the marketing world, building brands and also driving growth. He's currently the CMO of Optimum Healthcare, which is an IT digital transformation and consulting firm based in Jacksonville, but with close to 1,000 people all over the US. He's been recognized with honors from Sway Health, Oncon, and multiple CMO and Who's Who distinctions. He also has a podcast, by the way. The name of the podcast is Visionary Voices, under the Optimum Healthcare IT umbrella. So, we're excited to have you, Larry. Welcome.
Thanks, Carlos. I appreciate you having me on today.
And, did I cover the most important things in that intro? Anything else that you'd like to add there about your experience so the audience can know a little bit better?
No, I think you touched on everything. I think you hit all the high points, so I appreciate that.
All right. Good. So let's, out of those 20 years, let's say, in the marketing experience, I think half of that, has been with Optimum, right? So why don't you tell us a little bit, how things were when you start with Optimum, and then, I'm sure we'll get into where you guys are today and what has taken you here, right? But yeah, curious how things started, because I know it wasn't definitely like today back then.
Yeah, when I've been in healthcare, like I said, for over 21 years now. I was with another organization for about 10, and kind of got my feet wet in the healthcare marketing space. So when I moved over to Optimum, I was given an opportunity to build a marketing department from the ground up. The organization at the time was about 3.5 years old and had never had a dedicated marketing leader there, didn't have a dedicated marketing department. So when I started, they had a logo and then a website that was not exactly out of date, but didn't have a lot of information on it. And it was built on the 2012 version of Drupal. So we had a lot of work to do through a very methodic process to build that marketing department from the ground up, very methodically through the whole process, and to where we are today, which is, and I would call us probably the industry leader marketing department, without patting myself on the back too much. But we've built a very strong marketing organization and a very large community online with everything that we do. And we're thankfully very well known, which is a great compliment to my team.
Yeah, no, congrats about that. Yeah, it's a long time, but it's not that long at the same time, to go, you said the 3.5 years plus 10, 13 years to be, a leader in the industry, a company of 1,000 people. That's definitely accelerated growth,
It is, and, we sell services, right? So and those services have expanded year over year over year over year. So, when I started, we had to build a new website, right? To make sure that it was there. But then from there, you had to build out everything associated with the brand. What's your main font going to be? What's our color palette going to be? Right? We had the logo, so we knew we could work with that. But then it was just building out all the different pages that a website needs to educate the people that are coming to it. And then, of course, we had to create that website in such a way that it could be the delivery mechanism for the content that we were going to start creating, the blog posts, the case studies, the white papers, et cetera. So it was a step-by-step process, build the website, get it live. Great. Now let's focus on delivering some content. So we knew we had some case studies. So we started building out that section, and we knew we wanted to start a blog. So we start building out that section. And then you have to start building up your community to get that, So it was a lengthy process. I've been very excited just, last 2 years. I mean, in 24, we doubled our LinkedIn community by 100,000 followers and almost duplicated it this year. We ended up with about a 90% growth in 2025 on top of the 100% growth from last year. And you mentioned our podcast, Visionary Voices, that launched this year to a lot of success. We launched our newsletter middle of last year, 24, and that's grown by about 25,000 this year. So, we're focused really on 3 things in the marketing department. We build the content, we're creating the credibility, and we're growing our community. And LinkedIn is our community, right? That's the website or the social media channel that is business. I mean, yes, we have other ones, but the one we focus on the most is LinkedIn. So growing that community is our most important, probably one of our most, if not the most important KPI that we have, because the more followers we have, the more eyes gets on our content, and the more eyes that get on the content, there's more clicks on it. The more clicks take you to the website. So, our organization saw just outstanding growth as a whole this year from a revenue perspective. And you can look at all of the marketing statistics that translate to being one of the key drivers in that space. Our web traffic overall was up 58% this year, and that's all from driving traffic to our site from our content. So once we launched that website 9.5 years ago and started building that mechanism out to be the host of all of that content, and then going from there, that's just when things started just incrementally going up and up and up.
No, and it sounds like today you're at a level of maturity and performance and impact, right? That a lot of that's where really people want to get to, right? And not only that, but it sounds like you have not only well-defined strategy, but a proven strategy, right? That you're essentially doubling down, right? But I'm sure that wasn't always the case, right? Especially a few years back, perhaps you tried a few things that didn't work, right? And it's obviously a learning curve. Could you walk us through that, right? And I do want to get into specific of some of the things you mentioned, but I think it's also a lot of times it's as useful to know what didn't work and why, and the learnings, right? I know, for example, cold email you were mentioning, right? Like what else did you guys perhaps try and thought, that was the way, and then ended up realizing, what, no, it's not going to be like that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Learning from failure is a key component of growth, right? So, we had a couple of starts and stops along the way on how we were going to do our content, for example, or different types of content, expanding from not just a blog and case studies to lead generation with white papers, whether we're going to gate those white papers or leave them open with the certain technologies that are in the market that allow you to collect leads without forms, branching out into other areas like infographics or ebooks and whatever. You got to take on all those challenges because you can only, you want to deliver your content in as many different ways as possible, right? So building the website, it was partially in-house, partially outsourced. The outsourced piece was a failure. We had to bring the code back in-house. And it was still a WordPress site, but the guy was doing custom coding for things that there's probably or were plugins for. So even though we launched the website on time, we were already working on the next iteration of it and getting rid of all the custom code because it was bogging down the site. Our site was painfully slow. It was live, but it was painfully slow. So I think that was a failure of looking outside of our internal web developer for that. um, we had some early on difficulty. I wouldn't call it a failure, maybe a difficulty with promotion of our services. Full on brochures, uh, dedicating a page to an entire service offering that if you go back and look what we wrote back then, it was so wordy and said the same exact thing that I could have probably said with 30 words instead of 350 words. So it was more fine tuning as things kept going. I'm a believer that you should be doing something to your brand every 18 months, whether that's adding a new color to your color palette or refreshing your website or whatever the million other things that could be there. And we made some of those changes that did not go over well. They just didn't resonate in the market. And, we had to take a step back and revert a couple of times to what we had. Um, the healthcare IT consulting space is healthcare as a whole is a multi-billion dollar market, but it's also very niche and it's a lot of copycat. So what we were finding is that everything that we did, our competitors would then follow suit and try to copy us, whether it be colors or designs or something like that. So we found ourselves iterating just for the sake of iterating and taking too much time to keep things changing all the time to stay ahead when all we had to do was just keep moving forward what we were doing, knowing that the credibility that we were creating in the market, what we were doing would be the driving force. And if people wanted to copy us, then so be it. They couldn't keep up with the content creation. They couldn't keep up with the credibility. So even to this day, 9.5 years later, I mean, we're always looking. And end of the year, I have a conversation with my creative director. What are the trends looking like for next year's web? Did our theme put out new modules or things that we can do? Can we streamline our site more? Can we reduce the size of the site? That's the biggest challenge we have now is making sure we're mobile optimized and making sure that site is not slow and it's easy to consume. Because we're on our 5th iteration of our website now that we've redone because we've changed themes or things like that. And that's the biggest challenge today is just making sure people can access what they want to access. We launched our current iteration of our website early 2024, I think, if I had the dates right. And we reduced the size of the website by over 60%. We reduced the number of plugins by 26 or 27% because it was so bloated, over designed, and we were saying the same thing we're saying now, but with 1,000 words instead of half of that. So we really looked at what we did and said, okay, we've gone too far. Let's pull it back now and be more streamlined, like we did in 24 and still do today. That's the biggest challenge is understanding where you have gone too far and pull it back, or what the trends are showing just in general, and making sure that your website and your content is fresh and current and can be accessed. And thankfully, we haven't had too many failures. And I would never even really call them failures. They're more like hiccups along the way because nothing was like going to damage us. It's just, all right, that didn't work. Let's go back to what we did and take another shot at it. So
yeah, no, I think it also takes courage, to let's say cut your losses at the right time, because if not, you double down on things that are not the right way, right? So and also at the same time, it's nice to be in a position where people are copying and imitating you, right? It's a good problem to have, right?
it is.
It's worse to be the other guy, that.
Imitation is the best form of flattery, as they say.
Exactly. And it sounds like content and thought leadership really are a pillar, right? Of what of why you guys are driving growth and why is marketing effective. And you mentioned at the beginning you were struggling, right, with both the type of content that you were generating and the formats and the distribution, right? So could you elaborate a little bit on how that has evolved, and if
Mhm.
and how you got to the sweet spot where you are today?
Yeah, I think, first and foremost, I think our content has evolved because the company has evolved. At the very beginning, right, we had a very simple blog, and we were reaching out to our subject matter experts saying, hey, help us write some content, help us write some blog posts. We're going to market you on this, right? We're going to make you the centerpiece here. So if you go back and look at our content the first couple of years, we really only focused on a handful of topics, but we beat the dead horse. How many different ways can you talk about the same thing, right? But then if you look at how the organization has grown, we acquired a company back in 2020, which really was the stepping stone for launching our digital transformation service practice with ServiceNow and cloud and security and tech transformation, which opened the doors a lot for different types of content, where we're able to look at new things like infographics, for example. Um, that was one of the bigger ones that we really jumped into once, as we're leading up to that acquisition and past it, because the way people consume content changes. You know, blog posts for us are still really good, right? People read them. We have the engagement. We can look at the statistics. But to be able to download a graphic, so when we promote an infographic, we're like, hey, print it out, hang it on your wall, give it to your team. It's a tangible thing you can go back and look at. We started doing, instead of this a case study, we would do a case study video. So it's the same exact content, but in a visual moving piece with words and everything, right? Because people started shifting away from static reading to give me video content, right? Give me something I can watch. We went down that route. Um, even with our podcast that we launched this year, that's the continued evolution of content, right? People want to be able to listen while they're driving, while they're working out, keep it on in the background. Webinars, right? We we've done webinars the past couple of years when we've struggled in the past to do those, and we had a marketing firm that we were doing some stuff with, and we worked with them to really fine tune our webinar strategy. Um, I would I'm to the point now we've done too many webinars. We're doing them once a month and it's too many. So we're going to be pulling back next year. But we've developed these industry partnerships, sometimes through sponsorship, sometimes through just paid sponsorship, or just a partner in the industry when we're working with, where we're able to maximize our content creation with them as well. We had a partner where I did a AMA style webinar with back in September. And it's a paid sponsorship and it was included. And they drove the attendance, but it was very well attended. So when we, through our own webinar program, had a couple left to fill in this year, I said, hey, let's take what we did with that partner and do the same thing here. And it was relatively successful, right? But it's just the evolving of how people consume content. You have to pay attention to that. And if, you know, that's why we've moved from not just writing a blog post, but then our blog post had visuals in it, and not just doing an infographic, but doing a case study with a case study video, or launching the podcast. We're evolving as people are evolving, and we've had success with it. Doesn't mean you stop doing the other content. You just change it up a little bit. Like I said, taking a blog post, I mean, how many times do you go out and click on a post somewhere and it's just words, right? That's how blogs were written years ago. But now, if you go to our blogs and click on it, you see some of them have graphics built in. Some of them have videos embedded, because we started being more wise with the cross-functional usage of our content. So if I did a webinar on a content 3-4 months ago, and I'm hitting a blog post here that has similar messaging, I'll embed that webinar within that blog post. So now all of a sudden I'm getting to click on the blog post and I'm getting to play on the video. So bringing all of that stuff together making sure it's evergreen. It can be used over and over and over and over again, and upcycling your content, and then evolving with your content is really the best avenue to take there. So I think that answers your question.
And yeah, no, definitely. And in order to get there, it's usually there are usually a couple of challenges, or I'm sure there are more, but I remember two in particular. One is a lot of times it's difficult to get the expert team involved, right? The team that is not really part of marketing. They're delivering services to the clients, they're consultants, right? To bring them in, to shoot a video, even to write a blog post, right? And now maybe with AI, it's a little easier. They give you an outline, but it's still challenging, right? Like, so how did you overcome the challenge? And I think the second one is also, especially moving more from text to more interactive content and video content. It can be more expensive, right? Especially if you want to do the more professional, looking videos, where that when a company reaches the size of yours, that's a lot of times the expectation, from the C-suite, and really from everybody, right? So could you walk us like how you guys have overcome those two challenges, if you have overcome them?
So I'm very lucky to have an extremely talented creative director who works for me. He's been working for me for almost 10 years now. He used to work for Marvel and DC doing animation for movies, the old the Marvel Cinematic Universe and some DC stuff and whatever. So I always joke that he's like the John Travolta of creative. John Travolta because he was always called the triple threat, right? He could sing, he could dance, he can act. Well, my creative director can do web design, he can do video production, and your standard activities as a creative, right? Creating imagery for the website or for proposals or for whatever. So I thankfully don't have to really worry about a piece of content costing me something, because the cost of the position is already here. It's already part of my budget and part of my team. I have a content director whose one of his jobs is to making sure that we are working on the content. So, you can look at modern tools that we have now, and you would ask, how do you get the SMEs? Well, I know from conversation, let's talk about 26. I know from conversation that in one of our service lines, our enterprise application services, which is mainly our EHR services and also ERP, there are about 8 different topics that they're going to want to talk about throughout the next year, of areas in which we are growing as an organization. And they can give us stuff too, but we use tools like ChatGPT to help us draft content, right? We don't use that draft for immediate publication. By the time we're done with it after that draft, if you were to put it in an AI checker, it's less than 10%. So it's human written. That is a tool we use to help our SMEs. By them giving us some bullet points and us doing some research, we will ghostwrite stuff for them to review. Because we're busy organization. A lot of our SMEs, our executives, they're involved in very high profile projects. So marketing has had to adapt, of saying, hey, rather than, hey, SME, can you write a blog post on topic A for us? It's now, hey, can you give us some high level bullet points, maybe a short paragraph, and then we're going to take that and do some research and then come back with you to a draft. That has proven to be a good solution into continuing to develop our content. But again, you can take our content and put it through an AI checker, and it always comes back as human written, because we only use it to help us draft stuff. Obviously, a lot of these LLMs have pretty common noticeable trends that which one it was written with. ChatGPT, for example, loves using M dashes. So if you ever see somebody with a blog post with a whole lot of M dashes, rest assured it's probably written by ChatGPT. We make it a point to any piece of content that we publish, when we put it through our AI and plagiarism checker, that it's less than 10% AI, because then that means it's human written. So that's how we've gone about doing that. And a lot of times, another example is, we work with an organization called Chime, which is the College of Healthcare Information Management Executives. It's a sponsorship, but we have a lot of money investing. It's a target market. All the CIOs in our space are members for the most part. And we put on advisory events with them where we are in a room presenting to them, where we provide the presentation and a speaker, they provide the discussion guide, and then myself or somebody else or other marketing team members or a sales rep, whomever is in the room, and they're either recording the session or they're taking copious notes. And we take the notes, we take the recording, we take the discussion guide, we take the presentation, and we build content from that, which is giving us direct feedback from our perspective, or even some of them being clients already. So we try to take advantage of every opportunity we have when we're in front of a group of our target market to get the notes, listen to the conversations very carefully, and then use that also as a tool to draft that content. So firsthand, first world person content coming from coming from the mouth of the horse. Is that the right term? Is that the right analogy? The horse's mouth. Coming from the horse's mouth. There you go.
Yeah.
I couldn't get the words out there, but it's a challenge, right? To be able to, we created almost 70 pieces of content this year: blog posts, case studies, infographics, white papers, webinars, press releases, ebooks, the podcast. It's a lot of content.
How big is the marketing team?
My marketing team is myself, and I have 4 other people. I have a content director, I have a creative director, I have a director of marketing ops and events, and then I have an RFP and bid manager.
It's interesting because even at the size at which you are today, it's relatively small, I think.
Yes.
But to have a creative director and a content director at the beginning, that's actually, on the larger side, right? So, but I think it's interesting the approach of having that, what traditional advertising agencies call, the pair, right? The creative director or the copywriter, the creative director or art director, and then the copywriter or content person, right? And
yeah,
I think, it makes sense, to do that, internally, right? That to have that from day one, it sounds that it's been crucial, again, for efficiencies, for productivity, and for understanding the business in just 2 people, right? Like if you outsource some things, you end up wasting a lot of time and it's more expensive too, right? But I can definitely see, the value of.
And the one thing, I don't want to slap the face of agencies, right? There are times where agencies are very beneficial. Again, we used one the last couple of years that helped us with some stuff. But the engagement that you get from your agency is based on how much money you provide them. And at the sheer speed and scope of the content that we create, doesn't matter how much money I want to throw at an agency, they will not be able to keep up with the demands that we have. My marketing team is supporting 3 main pillars of service lines, and then each one of those service lines has sub-services. Plus, we recently rebranded a non-healthcare business that we have as well, specifically for ERP and for cloud services, right? So we're supporting 15 service lines between 5 people, and one of those people does RFPs. We're doing 30, 35, 36 events in 2026, whether it's a trade show or a reception somewhere. That's more than half of my budget is dedicated to events. So between the events and the content, That's really what's driving the marketing growth and the organization growth. And to try to have an agency, if I was to get rid of my creative director and get rid of my content director, I do not know an agency that would be able to do their job as quickly and as efficiently as they do now. I'm not saying agents, and I'm not knocking agencies. That an agency has a usage for something at some point in time. But I have always been a very big proponent of building your team from the inside and building it in such a way where you have some overlap in skill set. I always kind of compare it to how Bill Belichick built the Patriots teams during the dynasty, right? Where, you look at, he had some players that were wide receivers, but in a pinch, they could go and play cornerback, or an offensive lineman that could be a fullback, right? Whatever they're needed, they go and they do it. So I've built my team in such a way where, we have a whole lot of RFPs we're working on, and our bid writer needs help. Everybody can shift over and help that person. Everybody has writing skills. Everybody's cross-trained on how to use our RFP management software. If we're working on multiple events, everybody can shift and help with that stuff. So the agility of an internal team far outweighs, in my opinion, having an agency, because I can move my chess pieces around to help us whatever is going on. I would not be able to do that with an agency. Again, agencies have a usage at some point in time, everywhere, but I would not have the success at Optimum that I have had as a leader without the team that I've built. And I've had people come and go through those teams, but we've always replaced it with another person who is either just as good or in the end is actually better than a previous person. But that gives me agility, that gives me efficiencies, and that in the end gives me a speed that I wouldn't always get. So
Yeah, I think having good T-shaped marketers internally, and that they stay with you for a long time, I think that's perhaps the most important factor for a successful marketing team. I agree. I think because even though I own an agency and I sell agency services, right, I'm the first one that knows that it's not that difficult to learn how to launch an email campaign, right? Especially if you understand the audience and the landing page, and perhaps you even participated in creating the project for the landing page or the event, right? Or creating the content for the event, right? Then, you're going to know, these people, it doesn't make sense to send an email to these people. Like, then going to hospital and understanding how to upload an audience. Sure, I mean, the first time, you might struggle a little bit, but it's definitely easier to learn that than to learn the differentiators that of the company, of the service, of the product, right? So I hear what you're saying.
And I think there's another key part there as well, is knowing the industry, right? I can't tell you how many times a week I get a phone call from somebody who wants to sell me their lead generation services. And I'm very polite and I tell them, no, thank you. Your services do not work in my space. And they will say, oh, yes, they do. Oh, yes, they do. I'm like, no, they don't. Healthcare IT is such a relationship driven industry that as an organization, if we were to contract with somebody who's going to get me lead generation, we would do more harm to the business than I could even come close to imagining, because that's not what our target market likes. And our team, again, we've sat down and gone through education and leadership summits and courses on how to communicate with the target market here in healthcare IT. And they will tell you, don't send me emails. I'm never going to see them, right? It's all the relationship. So if we have a relationship with a CIO A, our best way of getting into CIO B is through CIO A. And they trust us and they'll make an introduction, or if they see us publish a case study that has the name of a CIO they know, they could care less what marketing I put out, but they'll reach out to another CIO friend of theirs and ask a question about the company. So a lot of this is learning what the industry wants, how it will engage with and understand what you're selling and understand what you're saying. But in the end, it's all about the relationships. So when I get these phone calls to sell lead services or email marketing, I'm like, it doesn't work. It's not going to, I'm sure you do a great job, but it doesn't work in this industry. And they will tell me, till they're blue in the face. Yes, it will. Yes, it will. Yes, it will. I'm like, then go try it with somebody else because I don't believe you and it's not going to work. And we've never used it. We never will use it. And look at the growth the company's gone through, right? So there's so many different things that get thrown at you in marketing. I'm sure, as an agency yourself, you can do a lot of those things, email marketing and so forth. And every industry is different, but healthcare IT is such a unique space. It's one of the reasons why I enjoy it. It's challenging to get your message through.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's no coincidence that more than half of your budget is going to events, as you mentioned, right? I mean, you
need to be in front of the people.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
Larry, and before we finish, how do you? One question I always like to ask: what are your KPIs, right? Like at a very high level, how do you know that those 5 people on your team or that your events budget or in general, right? How do you know it's working, it's not, and how do the C-suite, know it's working and it's not, right? Like how does those reports or conversations look and sound like?
Yeah, very good question. So I'm going to say something that's a little taboo, right? I really don't have specific KPIs, but what I have to show, I consider a KPI. And that sounds funny. So remember, earlier I said, we build content, we create credibility, and we want to grow the community. So the number one KPI that I look at is the community, was our LinkedIn following. And like I said, from January of 24 to January of 25, we had 100% community growth. And then from January of 25 up until today, we're at like 88% for this year. So my community has grown. So when I put my content out on LinkedIn, I know that it's being seen across all industries. The average LinkedIn engagement percentage is 3.2%. As a company, we have not been below 5% in like 7 years. And in some years, we're usually between about 5.5%. So we exceed engagements that are average. So I'm running about 5% and change engagement on that content. So that translates to my web traffic. If I look at my web traffic, I have several pages, our key pages, like our product pages, and so that are up between 2 and 450%. Between 200 and 450%. So overall, my web traffic was up 58% this year. So I'm looking at the community growth, I'm looking at the engagement of our content, I'm looking at our web traffic. And those 3 things, when I look at the success of the company this year, directly translate into a key contributor to that growth. Those are the metrics. So then I would say the fourth one, which is not really a KPI that I say is, be all, but it's the number of our content output percentage. So I have a goal next year to increase our content output by 15%. Well, this year we did like 65 pieces of content this year. So roughly 10 more pieces next year, right? Of whether it be a blog or a video or a case study or an infographic or whatever it may be. So as long as I keep creating the content, I track those three key, let's call them KPIs. To me, that is what I'm gunning for. And those are the numbers that go in front of the board when we talk about marketing growth. There are several other things out there, like there are industry awards that we're always fighting for. So those are, I manage that for the client reviews and all that stuff. But thankfully, I say this thankfully because some of your traditional marketing does not work in my space. I don't have to worry about number of emails sent, what was the click-through rate, what was the open rate. I don't have to worry about any of that. I just worry about those three big ones right there. The engagement in the content, the community growing, and the website traffic.
And I assume on one hand, obviously, you are increasing, for example, the community and the traffic from the right audience, right? Like that's a given, right? So as long as that happens, and as long as the content is engaging for the right audience, that will translate itself in interested folks. And that's where I think the second assumption comes in. I assume that the sales team, is now in charge of, okay, let's close these folks, right? So then the KPIs of the sales team is like, hey, you had a few people that are the right audience, that are clearly interested in engaging with us, right? Now it's your job, to talk to them and meet with them and try to close them, right? And I assume that the sales team agrees that, these folks are the right audience and they have the intent.
We have a Teams channel. Whenever new content is posted, we share it in there so they know that's there. We are very big on employee engagement with regards to our content. And we've had to educate them on how the algorithm works and how their engagement with it gets it on their profile. So we've gone through some training there to help them understand the best way to, like, comment, and share, and tag people in content and so forth. So and again, it's all directly correlated. You watch the employee engagement, which affects all the other engagement. And as I like to say, every set of eyes that clicks on your content could be a lead. So if we're bringing people to the website, we're going to be successful, hands down.
Larry, and last but not least, how about the podcast? Visionary Voices. You mentioned you completed season 1 and are currently recording season 2. How is that going, and how does that fit in terms of the overall marketing strategy and obviously community building?
So the concept of the podcast, again called Visionary Voices, was to amplify the voice of our guest. So you'll never hear me on the podcast say the company name. If it comes up in conversation from our guest, that's fine. But we're not here to talk about us. We're here to talk about them. So we did 7 episodes in season 1 in 2025. And we spoke to a pretty wide range of individuals in our industry doing interesting things. Right. There was our last one was in regards to a gentleman whose organization was using the Apple Vision Pro in the OR for some non-invasive surgical procedures. And it was a huge case, and I was just so enamored by it. We spent a good 30 minutes talking about that. We talked about agentic AI on an episode. We talked about cloud journey from a person or 2 gentlemen on there. We talked about a lot of stuff. We talked about minority leadership. We talked about the importance of building your own personal brand. That's been great. So then going into season 2, I have a couple of goals. One, I want to be more diverse. I want to make sure that I'm having, season 1, unfortunately, just wasn't able to have any women on. Well, this year I've already recorded an episode with a woman, which I'm very excited for. We were just at an industry event in November, and people were stopping me in the hallway saying how much they've enjoyed the podcast and asking if they could be on it. So that's one season and people are asking to be on it. So I'm pretty excited about that. From a content perspective, it just fits into a different avenue for us to deliver content. The conversations are kind of like you and I are having, very conversational. We try to do it in one take. I don't think we've made one edit yet to a single one of those. And just talking about different things in healthcare. What makes healthcare unique is that it literally changes daily. And whether it's from government regulations or just new technologies or new philosophies, you name it, something is always going on, and there's always something interesting going on at one of these provider organizations that is important for everybody else to hear about. So going into season 2, one thing I've added is when we're signing off, I ask our guests if they have anything else they want to share with our listeners. And adding that little segment has been fantastic because they're literally giving advice at the end of these podcasts now, where if someone listens to the whole thing, there's literally a tangible takeaway if they're doing something similar or will be doing something similar, and advice. And I can't wait for that to get out there. So we did 7 episodes this year. Our goal is to do 10 to 12 this year. We'll probably end up being around 10. And we've got 3 recorded, and I have 3 or 4 scheduled shortly after the new year. So it's an exciting piece. Again, we talked about struggles and earlier. We couldn't get anybody to commit to record it. And then I was ready to scrap it because we weren't getting the commitment. And then all of a sudden, people we'd reached out to came back and said, yes, they're interested. And we went from having 1 episode recorded to having 6 in about a month and a half. And I was sold that, okay, I think we're good. And we did a really good job on it. They came out great. And the feedback has been phenomenal. So I can't ask for anything more than that.
Yeah, congrats on that.
Thank you.
And for the audience, especially the ones that are in the world of healthcare IT, check it out, Visionary Voices. And now we cannot end this episode without doing what you do at Visionary Voices, right? Giving a piece of advice to the audience.
Yeah. So I would if you are a healthcare IT marketer, the one thing I'll always say is learn. Take an opportunity to learn something new every day, because our industry is so unique that you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't learn something new every day. That would be my advice.
All right. There you go. Thanks a lot for coming to the podcast, Larry. Best of luck.
I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks for listening to the Tailwind Marketing Podcast. If you enjoyed it, remember to subscribe for future episodes. Until next time.